The dust of the Dakota Territory settled on dreams and graves alike, but for Elara Bishop, it was a shroud. She was a bartered bride, a piece of property promised to a cold-hearted tyrant, Jasper Thorne, to settle her father's desperate debt. She thought her life was over, a gilded cage waiting to be locked, but she didn't know that fate itself was watching. She didn't know that a warrior, a man of the shadows and the bluffs, had marked her. And she didn't know that the sky itself was about to bleed, for under the crimson light of a blood moon, a debt would be paid, a life would be shattered, and a warrior would make his claim. The town of Redemption Creek was a promise baked into the cracked, unforgiving earth of the Dakota Territory. It was a place of high hopes and shallow graves, where the only thing more powerful than the relentless sun was the signature of Judge Alistair Thorne. His influence was not just in the courthouse, it was in the clink of glasses at the saloon, the stamp of approval at the land office, and the desperate, quiet fear in the home of Gideon Bishop. Gideon's daughter Elara felt that fear as a constant, cold companion. At 20, she possessed a resilience that the prairie demanded, but it was being worn down to a nub. She was in the town's parlance, a promised woman. Her hand had been pledged not in love or even in mutual respect, but as collateral. Her intended was Jasper Thorne, the judge's only son. Where the judge was a creature of cold, calculating shadow, Jasper was a creature of arrogant, brittle fire. He walked the boardwalks of Redemption Creek as if he had laid every plank himself, his silver dollar eyes assessing every person, every horse, and every plot of land for its value to him. He saw Elara as his most prized acquisition. This morning, the cage felt particularly small. Elara stood in her family's small parlor, the threadbare curtains doing little to stop the intrusive morning light. Her father Gideon sat at the table, his hands usually so strong from mending fences and working the small ranch, trembling as he stared into a cold cup of coffee. "He's coming by this afternoon," Gideon said, his voice a low rasp. "Jasper. He wants to discuss the seating at the Founders' Ball." Elara stiffened her hands, tightening on the back of the chair. "He means he wants to show me off, to remind everyone what he has bought." "Elara, please," Gideon begged, his eyes haunted. "Don't provoke him. You know what his father holds over us. The accusation." The accusation. The word hung in the air like smoke. 2 years prior, a fire had destroyed the town's granary. Suspicion, expertly guided by Judge Thorne, had fallen on Gideon. Just when the rope seemed inevitable, the judge had stepped in, clearing Gideon's name with a wave of his hand. The price for this mercy was simple: the Bishop Ranch and Elara's hand in marriage to Jasper, uniting the Thorns' massive holdings with the small but vital Bishop land which controlled a key creek. "It was a lie, Father. We both know it," Elara said, her voice low but fierce. "A lie that hangs heavier than a rope," Gideon whispered. "He owns us, girl. He owns the sheriff, he owns the bank. If I refuse, he'll see me swing and you'll be left with nothing. This is the only way." "It is not a way," Elara said, turning to the window. "It is an ending." She needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of her father's guilt and her own future. Grabbing a worn shawl, she hurried out the door, ignoring her father's weak protest. The main street was already buzzing. Wagons rumbled by, kicking up a pale dust that coated everything, including the stiff dark suit of Jasper Thorne, who was just stepping out of the land office. He saw her instantly. A predatory smile split his face. "Elara, my dear," he called, his voice carrying an oily confidence. He strenued across the street, deliberately blocking her path. "Running errands or just running?" "I am just walking, Jasper," she said, trying to sidestep him. He blocked her again, enjoying the power. He was a handsome man, in a conventional way, with sharp features and dark hair, but his eyes were flat like polished stones. He reached out and stroked a lock of her hair that had escaped her bun. "Soon you won't be walking anywhere without my say-so. My father is planning the ball. You will wear the blue silk. It will show everyone you are a thorn woman now." Elara flinched at his touch. "I am not a thorn woman yet." "A formality," he sneered. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Do not forget, Elara. Your father's life is in my hand. You would do well to remember to smile when I tell you to." Revulsion and anger warred within her. She wanted to scream, to slap that smirk off his face. But she saw the sheriff, a man named Brody, watching from across the street. He wasn't watching for her safety. He was watching for Thorn. "I must get to the mercantile," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. As she pulled away from him, her reticule slipped from her grasp. Its contents, a few coins, a handkerchief, spilling into the thick dust of the street. She bent to retrieve them, her face hot with humiliation. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting to see Jasper's polished boots. Instead, she saw a pair of worn, beaded moccasins. Her gaze traveled up. The man was tall, broader than Jasper, with a stillness that was utterly foreign to the frantic energy of the town. He was Lakota, his dark hair long and unbound, his face stark and unreadable. He wore no paint, just simple buckskins, but he carried an aura of authority that made Jasper Thorn look like a spoiled child. He bent in one fluid motion and picked up her handkerchief. He didn't offer it. He simply held it, his black eyes fixed on hers. In that gaze, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. She felt seen. Not as an asset, not as a debt, but as a person. "Give that here, boy." Jasper snapped his hand, dropping to the pistol on his hip. "It's soiled. Give it here and get back to whatever hole you crawled from." The warrior's gaze shifted to Jasper. The stillness in him sharpened, turning from rock to obsidian. He did not move, did not speak. He simply looked at Jasper, and in that look there was a quiet contempt that was more insulting than any shout. "I said, give it here." Jasper's face was turning purple. Slowly the Lakota man turned his gaze back to Elara. He extended his hand, offering her the handkerchief. His eyes held hers, and it felt like a silent, profound question. Elara's hand shook as she took the cloth. "Thank you," she whispered. The man gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then, without a backward glance at Jasper, he turned and walked away, melting into the alley between the saloon and the smithy, disappearing as silently as he had arrived. "Filth!" Jasper spat his courage, returning now that the man was gone. "He dared to touch your things. When I am master of this town, that kind will not be allowed within the limits. Now go home, Elara. You've made enough of a scene." He stormed off toward the courthouse, leaving Elara alone in the street. She clutched the dusty handkerchief, her heart hammering. It wasn't Jasper's cruelty that shook her. It was the absolute, unnerving silence of the warrior's eyes. He hadn't just seen her. He had seen her cage. Elara did not go home. She couldn't. The walls of that house, filled with her father's shame and her own suffocating future, were more than she could bear. She walked past the edge of town, past the last fence post and the sad leaning livery, and headed for the only place she had ever felt a sense of freedom, the high bluffs that overlooked Redemption Creek. The trail was steep, the wind whipping her skirts and pulling at her hair, but she welcomed the sting. It was real. It was not the soft, suffocating touch of the blue silk Jasper had promised her. This land was a contradiction. It was harsh, demanding, and stripped a person down to their bones. Yet in its starkness, it was honest. The bluffs were her sanctuary. From here she could see the tiny, frantic movements of the town below, and to the west, the endless rolling expanse of the prairie, a place where a person could disappear. A place where perhaps a person could be free. She reached her usual spot, a flat ledge of rock shaded by a lone, twisted pine. She sat pulling her knees to her chest, and finally let the tears of rage and helplessness come. She wept for her father, a good man broken by a bad one. She wept for herself, for the life she would never have, the love she would never know, the children she would bear for a man she despised. The promise was a chain, and every day Judge Thorne added another link. The Bishop Ranch was small, but the creek that ran through it was the only reliable water source for miles, aside from the river that Thorne already controlled. By marrying Elara, Jasper wouldn't just get a wife, he would get a monopoly on the water and thus a stranglehold on every other rancher in the valley. Her father's crime had been a setup from the beginning, a cold, strategic move to acquire her land and her. She was so lost in her grief that she didn't hear the scuff of a boot on gravel. It was the sudden, sharp ch-ch of a rattlesnake that snapped her back to reality. Elara froze. Not one, but two. A pair of large diamondback rattlesnakes were coiled not 6 feet from her, their bodies warming on the flat rock. They had been disturbed by her arrival, and they were agitated, their flat heads weaving their tails a blur of warning. She was trapped. The rock ledge was narrow. To her back was a sheer drop of 50 feet. To her front were the snakes. She held her breath, knowing any sudden movement would be her last. "Do not move. Do not breathe. Do not think." The voice came from above her. It was calm, low, and clear. She didn't dare turn her head. A shadow moved on the rock wall above the ledge. The Lakota warrior from the street landed silently between her and the snakes. He had moved with a speed she would not have thought possible. He hadn't come from the path, he had come from the rocks themselves. He stood perfectly still, his body relaxed, his gaze fixed on the snakes. He held no weapon save for a knife at his belt. He didn't seem to need one. He watched the snakes, and they watched him. The rattling quieted, becoming hesitant. He took one slow, deliberate step forward. The rattling intensified, but it had a different, less aggressive pitch. He took another step. Then he spoke, not to her, but to them. His voice was a low, guttural murmur, not in English. It was a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. It was not a plea, but a statement. One of the snakes uncoiled its head, dropping. It slithered slowly, reluctantly toward the edge of the ledge and disappeared into a crevice. The second one held its ground for a moment longer. The warrior stamped his foot into a hard, flat sound. The snake recoiled and then followed its mate, vanishing into the rocks. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the high, thin cry of a hawk. Elara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, collapsing back against the rock face, her entire body shaking. The warrior turned to her. His face in the clear sunlight was even more imposing. It was a face of sharp angles and old knowledge, his eyes holding no trace of the arrogance she saw in Jasper, nor the fear she saw in her father. They held only an unsettling calm. "You should not be here," he said. His English was perfect, laced with no accent she could place, only a precision that made every word count. I didn't see them. Thank you. You saved my life," Elara stammered. "They were here first," he said simply, as if this explained everything. He looked at her, his gaze intense. "The snakes are not the only poison on this bluff. This land is angry. Angry. It is being choked." He gestured not to the town, but further south down the creek line. The man you will marry, his father. They build a new dam. They take the water from the creek, divert it all to their own valley. They poison the ground they walk on. The land does not forget. Elara was stunned. This man, this savage, as Jasper had called him, knew more about the town's business than she did. A new dam. That would be the final nail in the coffin for the other ranchers, and it would make the Bishop Ranch, her ranch, even more valuable. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He watched her for a long moment. "My people called this place Wamakakan Sapa, the place of the black animals. Your people call it Redemption Creek. They are wrong. There is no redemption here, only theft. You live near here." "I am here," he replied, a strange, definitive answer. "I watch. I remember." He looked back toward the town. "You are the one who is promised, the price for your father's freedom." Elara flushed, shame washing over her again. "You know about that. I know the sound of a thorn trap. I have seen them set for many seasons." He took a step closer, and she had to fight the urge to flinch. He was not threatening, but his presence was overwhelming. "He did not save your father. He only bought him. And you. I have no choice." She said the words, tasting like ash. "It is my duty." "Duty is a cage you build for yourself," the warrior said. "He will not stop with your ranch. He will not stop with you. A man who chokes the land will eventually choke his own wife." He turned to leave, moving toward the impossible path he had descended. "Wait," Elara called out, surprising herself. "I don't even know your name." He paused, his back to her. He looked up at the sky where the hawk was still circling. "Your people have a name for me. They call me Hawk. It is enough." He disappeared over the ridge, leaving Elara alone with his words. "Duty is a cage you build for yourself." The wind felt colder now, and the freedom of the bluffs felt like a mockery. He hadn't just saved her from the snakes. He had shown her with terrifying clarity the fangs of the trap she was walking into. Returning to town was like submerging herself in murky water. Elara moved through the duties of her day, in a fog, her mind replaying the encounter on the bluffs. Hawk's words echoed with the rattlesnake's warning. A man who chokes the land will eventually choke his own wife. She found Jasper waiting for her on her front porch, rocking back on his heels, a thin cigar clamped in his teeth. His arrogance was magnified by the memory of Hawk's quiet dignity. "You were gone a long time," Jasper said. It wasn't a question. "My father is displeased. The invitations for the Founders' Ball are being drawn up. He expects you at dinner tonight, at our home, to formally review them." "I have chores here, Jasper." Elara said, her patience already gone. He stepped in front of her, blocking the door. He caught her chin in his hand, his fingers digging in, forcing her to look at him. "Your chores are what I say they are. Your life is what I say it is. I saw you, you know, running off to the bluffs like a wild thing." His eyes narrowed. "Did you go to meet that redskin filth from this morning? Is that it?" The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that Elara reacted without thinking. She slapped his hand away from her face. "Don't you touch me." The air crackled. Jasper's face went pale, then dark, with a rage that was far more frightening than his usual bluster. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh like a vice. "You will not," he hissed, his face inches from hers, "ever raise your hand to me. You are a bishop. You are property. My father holds the deed to your ranch and the warrant for your father's arrest. If I say the word, he will be in chains before sundown. Do you understand me?" Elara refused to cry out, though her arm screamed in protest. "Let me go." You are mine, Elara, and you will learn your place." He shoved her toward the door. "Be ready at 7, and wear the green dress, the one I sent over. I want to see if it was worth the money." He stormed off the porch, leaving Elara trembling, a dark, blooming bruise already forming on her arm. The cage was no longer a metaphor. It had teeth. That night, the dinner at the Thorn Mansion was an exercise in humiliation. The house was a monument to Eastern money and Western power, all dark wood, heavy velvet, and staring animal heads. Judge Alistair Thorne sat at the head of the table, a portly man with a high collar and eyes as dead as a shark's. He spoke of the upcoming ball as a coronation. "It will cement our family's position, of course," the judge intoned, swirling his brandy. "It celebrates the founding of this town, a town I built from nothing. And it will celebrate the union of our two great families." Elara looked at her father, who was staring at his plate, shrinking in his chair. Two great families. It was a farce. The Bishop Ranch, small as it is, represents the pioneer spirit. The judge continued, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "And its acquisition represents the future, progress. Jasper, you will read the announcement." Jasper, preening, read the invitation. It was a flowery, possessive script announcing his marriage to Elara and celebrating the unification of the Thorn and Bishop lands. Elara felt sick. She pushed her untouched food around her plate. The bruise on her arm throbbed under the sleeve of the green dress. She endured the evening, her silence mistaken for compliance. But as she lay in bed that night, Hawke's words returned to her. "This land is angry. Duty is a cage." She had to know more. She had to know what she was really being sold for. 2 days later, she slipped away again. She didn't go to the bluffs, but followed the creek south, as Hawke had indicated. It took her an hour of walking through dense scrub and willow thickets, but she found it. It was a massive raw earth dam. 12 hired men were working on it, felling trees and moving rocks. It was almost complete. It cut the creek in half. Above the dam, the water was pooling, spreading out, drowning the cottonwoods. Below the dam, the creek bed was already drying, turning to a muddy, cracked ribbon of earth. This was the water that fed her ranch. This was the water that fed the entire valley. Thorne wasn't just taking her land. He was going to turn the rest of the valley into a desert, forcing everyone else to sell to him for pennies on the dollar. He was choking the land. "He told you it was here." Elara spun around. Hawke was there, standing on a rise just above her, masked by the glare of the sun. "You knew," she breathed. "I know," he corrected. "I watch. This is the 3rd time he has done this. The first was on the Powder River. The second was on the Cheyenne. Each time he builds a town, bleeds the land, and calls it progress. But this is theft, the other ranchers. They will not know until it is too late," Hawke said, his voice flat. "They will blame the dry season. They will blame God. They will not blame the judge who hosts a fancy ball for them." Elara looked at the dam, then at him. "Why are you telling me this? What do you care about the ranchers?" "I do not care about the ranchers," Hawke said, walking down the rise to stand near her. "They are thieves just as he is. They stole this land from my people. But I care about the land, and I know a man who breaks his word to the earth will break his word to you." "You keep warning me," Elara said, her voice shaking. "But what can I do?" "You saw what he is. He has my father. He has the law." "His law," Hawke countered. "There are other laws. Laws of the earth. Laws of blood." He looked up at the sky, though the sun was high and bright. "In 3 nights the moon will turn to shadow. Your people call it a blood moon. My people call it Han-Hepiwi, the night sun. It is a time of great change, a time of endings. He turned his full attention to her, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical weight. The judge is celebrating his new beginning at his ball. The moon says it will be his ending. He has built his trap, but he has forgotten that all traps have a weakness. What weakness? Ilara asked. You. Me, I am the bait. I am the prize. I am not a weakness. You are the thing he believes he owns. He will not look at you, Hawk said. He will only look at his prize. He will not see what you are doing. He will not see you walk away. Ilara's blood ran cold. Walk away, Flea, where he would hunt me down. He would hunt us down. He would kill you. He would hang my father. Your father is already dead, Hawk said, not cruelly, but with a finality that chilled her. His spirit died when he signed your name to that paper. He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small dark object. It was a hawk's feather, perfectly black. At the ball, when the moon is highest and turning red, he will be drunk on his own power. That is when you must choose, your cage or the wild. He pressed the feather into her hand. If you choose the wild, find a way to leave the hall. I will be waiting by the creek. And if I don't, then you will be choked just like the land. He turned and was gone, disappearing back into the willows, leaving Ilara with the feather in her hand, and an impossible choice. He was offering her an escape, but the cost was everything she knew. Her home, her father, her name. She looked at the ugly rising dam, a monument to the Thorn family's greed. She closed her hand around the feather. 3 nights. The night of the Founder's Ball. The night of the blood moon. The main hall of the Redemption Creek Hotel had been transformed. Judge Thorn had spared no expense, importing crystal chandeliers, bolts of red velvet, and enough champagne to impress a delegation from Washington. The Founder's Ball was not a celebration. It was a demonstration of absolute power. Ilara stood at the top of the main staircase, her arm linked with Jasper's. Her skin crawled where he touched her. She was wearing the blue silk he had demanded, a dress so heavy and constricting, she felt like she was already in a coffin. Smile, my dear, Jasper whispered, his breath hot on her ear. The entire territory is watching. My father is about to give his speech. Ilara scanned the crowd. The entire town was there, their faces flushed with free champagne and deference. Ranchers, merchants, the sheriff, all orbiting Judge Thorn like moths around a scorching flame. Her father Gideon was near the punch bowl, his face a sickly grey, his eyes darting nervously toward Ilara and the judge. He looked like a man already at his own hanging. Judge Thorn, his chest puffed out, raised a glass. Friends, neighbors, pioneers, welcome. The room fell silent. We gather tonight to celebrate progress. We celebrate the taming of this wild land. When I first arrived in this valley, he boomed. There was nothing but rock dust and savages. A few men laughed. Ilara felt a chill. And look at it now. A town, a community, a beacon of civilization. We have built this town on vision, on hard work, and on the rule of law. More applause. The judge beamed. And tonight we celebrate the future of that vision, the union of my son Jasper with Miss Ilara Bishop. He raised his glass to her. A union that secures the future of Redemption Creek, unifying our 2 great land holdings and ensuring prosperity for us all. The crowd cheered. Jasper squeezed Ilara's arm painfully, raising her hand as if she were a prize heifer. Ilara forced a smile that felt like broken glass. Through the large windows at the end of the hall, she could see the moon. It was high and full, a perfect white disk. It was not red yet. Not yet. The music started a reedy, insistent waltz. Jasper yanked her onto the dance floor. Everyone is watching, he hissed, his grip bruising. Look at me. Look like you are the happiest woman in the world, or I will make your father wish he'd never been born. She went through the motions, a hollow doll dancing on a tyrant's string. She danced with Jasper. She danced with the judge, who patted her back with a damp proprietary hand. She danced with the sheriff, who offered her a clumsy, leering compliment. With every turn, she felt the cage door swinging shut, the lock clicking into place. An hour passed. Then 2. The party grew louder, the men drunker. Jasper was holding court near the bar, bragging about the new dam, which he presented as a public works project, that would manage the creek's unreliable flow. The ranchers whose livelihoods were about to be destroyed nodded along, eager to stay in his good graces. Ilara, finally given a moment's peace, slipped onto the balcony for a breath of air. The night was cold, a sharp contrast to the stuffy, overheated hall. And the moon was changing. A shadow dark and ominous was beginning to creep across its face. A coppery reddish tint was bleeding in from the edges. The blood moon. Her heart hammered. When the moon is highest and turning red. She clutched the small dark hawk's feather, hidden in the palm of her glove. He is waiting. Choose the wild. But how the hall was crowded. Jasper's eyes and his father's were everywhere. Her father. She looked inside and saw him slumped in a chair, his head in his hands. If she ran, they would destroy him. He was a dead man either way, Hawk had said. But could she be the one to pull the trigger? A beautiful night, isn't it? Ilara jumped. It was Sheriff Brody, his badge gleaming in the dim light, a cigar in his hand. Sheriff, I was just getting some air. A bit of advice, Miss Bishop. He said, his voice friendly, but his eyes cold. The judge is a great man. Jasper is a lucky... Well, he's a man who knows what he wants. Don't you go getting any foolish ideas. This is the best thing that could have happened to you or your pa. A woman alone out here. It's a hard life. A woman with the Thorn name. That's a queen. I am grateful for the judge's generosity. Ilara said the words, choking her. Good girl. He nodded, satisfied. Now you'd best get back inside. Jasper's looking for you. As he turned to go, a sudden shout came from the street. Fire, fire at the edge of town! Panic rippled through the hall. People rushed to the windows and the balcony. Ilara's stomach clenched. She looked over the railing. An orange glow was building in the night sky, flickering against the deepening blood-red moon. It was in the direction of her ranch. No, she whispered. Oh no. People started pouring out of the hotel, yelling and pointing. The town's fire bell began to clang, a desperate, frantic sound. It's the Bishop place, someone yelled. The whole ranch is going up. Ilara's blood turned to ice. She pushed through the crowd, her father finding her at the steps. Ilara, our home. But as she looked past him, she saw Judge Thorn and Jasper. They were not panicked. They were not alarmed. They were standing together by the doorway, and in the flickering light of the distant fire, she saw Jasper's face. He was smiling, a dark, smug, satisfied smile. Ilara stopped dead. The sounds of the panic, the bell, her father's cries, it all faded. They set the fire. This wasn't an accident. This was the final move. This was the judge destroying the last asset. Gideon Bishop had the last piece of leverage, the home she had been born in. They were scouring the debt from the books, ensuring her father was a penniless, broken beggar, utterly dependent on their mercy. The marriage wasn't enough. They had to have everything. It's all gone, Gideon sobbed, collapsing onto the steps. No more running, Ilara. Jasper's voice was right behind her. He grabbed her arm, his grip like steel. A terrible accident, a tragedy. Good thing you'll have a new home. My home. He began to drag her back inside the chaotic, emptying hall. There's no point in going to the fire. It's too late. But the judge is still here. He can marry us tonight. A private ceremony. No need to wait. We'll consolidate our grief. This was the trap. The ball was a distraction. The fire was the hammer. And this was the moment her life ended. No! Elara said, her voice barely a whisper. What did you say? Jasper snarled, yanking her. No! She looked at him, and for the first time, her fear was eclipsed by a pure, cold hatred. She saw the face of the man who had just burned her past to the ground. In the chaos, no one was watching them. The judge was barking orders at the sheriff, organizing a bucket brigade he knew was useless. Her father was a crumpled heap. Elara planted her feet. She ripped the hawk's feather from her glove and drove the sharp quill end deep into the back of Jasper's hand. He screamed a high, shocked sound, his grip releasing as he recoiled. Elara didn't hesitate. She didn't look back. She lifted the heavy blue silk skirts and ran. She ran out the back of the hotel, away from the fire, away from the town toward the darkness, and the creek, leaving the sounds of the farce, and the bell, and Jasper's enraged cry of, "Stop her, what behind?" She ran under the light of a moon that was now a deep, terrifying, bloody red. The air was filled with the smoke of her burning home. It stung her eyes, filled her lungs, and fueled her flight. Elara scrambled down the embankment behind the hotel, her fine silk dress catching and tearing on brambles. The thin dancing slippers were useless on the rocky terrain, but she didn't feel the stones cutting into her feet. All she felt was the pounding of her heart, and the single desperate thought, the creek. The moon, now at the height of its eclipse, was a malevolent red eye in the sky. It cast the landscape in a spectral, hellish light. The world was not dark. It was crimson. Elara, Jasper's voice. He was coming after her, his rage making him fast. She could hear him crashing through the brush behind her, accompanied by at least one other person. Get her. The judge will pay a bonus alive. It was Sheriff Brody. Elara burst through the line of willows and stumbled into the shallow, muddy creek bed, the very creek the thorns were choking. The water was cold, shocking her, but she pushed through it, heading for the opposite bank. There. Jasper's voice was closer now. She clawed her way up the far bank, her dress soaked and heavy. She looked back. Jasper and Sheriff Brody were plunging into the water. Behind them, at the top of the embankment, she saw the silhouette of Judge Thorne, watching, and her father Gideon being held by two of Thorne's hired men. "You can't run, Elara," Jasper bellowed, climbing the bank. "You're mine." He lunged, grabbing the hem of her dress. She fell hard. The breath knocked out of her. He was on her in an instant, his face contorted with fury, the red moonlight painting his features into a demonic mask. He raised his hand, the one she had stabbed, and backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded in her cheek. She tasted blood. "You stupid—" He never finished the sentence. There was no sound, no warning. One moment Jasper was above her, and the next he was ripped away, as if by an invisible hand. Hawk emerged from the shadows. He was not the calm, still man from the bluffs. This was a warrior. His face was streaked with dark paint, stark and terrifying in the bloody light. He moved with a speed that was inhuman. He threw Jasper to the ground as if he were a sack of grain. Sheriff Brody, stunned, fumbled for his pistol. Hawk was faster. He didn't draw a gun. He closed the distance in 2 strides and struck Brody in the throat with the edge of his hand. The sheriff crumpled, gurgling, clutching his neck. Jasper scrambled to his feet, drawing his own revolver. "You savage, I'll kill you!" He fired. The shot was deafeningly loud in the night, but Hawk was no longer there. He had dropped, rolled, and come up inside Jasper's guard. The fight was brutal and blessedly short. It was not a barroom brawl. It was an execution. Hawk broke Jasper's firing arm with a sickening snap. He disarmed him, and then a single precise blow to the temple sent Jasper crashing to the ground unconscious. It had taken less than 10 seconds. Across the creek, Judge Thorne screamed in incoherent rage. "Shoot him! Shoot them both!" His 2 men holding Gideon drew their weapons, but they were too far, and their targets were in the shadows. Hawk stood over Ilara, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was silhouetted against the burning ranch in the distance and the blood-red moon above. He was the most terrifying and beautiful thing she had ever seen. He reached down, his hand open. "The moon of endings." He said, his voice a low growl. "Your old life is over." Ilara looked at his hand. Then she looked across the creek, at her father, a prisoner, at the judge who was screaming for her death, at the man who had tried to beat her into submission, lying broken at her feet. She looked at Hawk. He was offering her nothing. No home, no security, no promises. He was offering her only a way. "They'll kill my father," she whispered, her voice broken. "He is already dead," Hawk said again, his voice softer, but no less final. "They will kill him whether you stay or go. The fire was to destroy him. You are just the spoils. Do not die with him." Tears streamed down her face, washing away the dust and blood. She looked at Gideon, her heart breaking. "I'm sorry, Father," she whispered to the wind. She took Hawk's hand. His grip was like iron. He pulled her to her feet and half dragged, half carried her into the darkness of the Badlands. Behind them, the sounds of gunfire and the judge's curses were swallowed by the vast, indifferent night. Ilara Bishop, the promised bride of Redemption Creek, was gone, claimed by a warrior under the light of the blood moon. The world became a blur of rock shadow and survival. Hawk set a pace that was punishing. He led Ilara deep into the Badlands, a labyrinth of canyons and gullies where no posse would dare follow in the dark. Ilara's fine silk dress was shredded, her thin shoes long since destroyed. Her feet were cut and bleeding, but Hawk didn't slow down. When she stumbled, he caught her. When she cried, he ignored it. He was not being cruel. He was keeping them alive. "They will come," he said, as they finally took shelter in a narrow, hidden crevice just before dawn. "Thorne will not stop. This is not about you anymore. It is about his pride. He will send everyone." "He'll send Silas Croft," Ilara whispered, huddling against the cold rock. The name left a bitter taste. Croft was a bounty hunter, a man with a reputation for finding anyone or anything. He was a legend more wolf than man, and he worked exclusively for Judge Thorne's highest-paying contracts. "I know this man," Hawk said, his face impassive as he tended to a cut on Ilara's arm with a poultice of herbs he'd gathered in the dark. "He thinks in straight lines. We will not." For 3 days they moved. Ilara entered a state of exhausted delirium. Hawk taught her. He was a patient but demanding teacher. He taught her to walk on rock, not dirt, to leave no tracks. He showed her which plants held water, how to read the clouds for a coming storm, and most importantly, how to be silent. To blend into the land until she was just another shadow. The pampered, caged girl from Redemption Creek began to fade. In her place, someone harder, quieter was being born. The pain in her feet subsided into a dull throb. The hunger in her belly became a familiar ache. On the 3rd night they spoke. They sat by a smokeless fire, hidden in a cave, sharing a rabbit Hawk had caught with a simple snare. "Why?" Ilara asked, her voice hoarse. "Why did you do it?" "Why save me?" Hawk stared into the small fire. "I told you. I watch. I remember." He finally told her his story. His people had lived in this valley for generations. When the white settlers began to arrive, his father had tried to make peace, but Judge Thorne wanted the land. He didn't want to share. He wanted to own. It was winter. Hawk said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, which was more terrifying than rage. Our stores were full. We were preparing for the long snow. Thorne's men, led by a younger Sheriff Brody, came under a flag of truce. They offered gifts, blankets, sugar, coffee. He paused. The sugar was poisoned, not to kill, to sicken. When half our camp was dying of fever, his men came back. They burned our village. They shot anyone who could stand. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth. I was a boy. My mother hid me in the rocks. I watched my father, my sister, my people all murdered. I watched Thorne and Brody laugh as our home burned. He looked at Ilara, his eyes like black ice. He who remembers. That is my name. I have watched him for 15 years. I have watched him build his town on my people's graves. I have watched him poison the land as he poisoned my family. You wanted revenge, Ilara breathed. Revenge is a fire that burns the man who holds it, Hawk said. I want justice. I waited for him to become so proud, so arrogant that he would make a mistake. That mistake was you. Me. He wanted you. He wanted your land. He set a fire to get it. He did it in front of the whole town. He did it on the night of the blood moon. He has broken his own laws and the land's. He showed his hand. He broke his pride. Hawk explained he hadn't just planned to save her. He had planned to use the chaos of the ball to expose the judge. Her running was just the catalyst. Ilara realized he hadn't just been saving her. She had been his weapon. The thought should have made her angry, another person, using her for their own ends. But it didn't. He had offered her a choice. He had given her the power. Their conversation was cut short by a sound. A single pebble dislodged from the canyon, rim above them. Hawk was on his feet in an instant, dousing the fire, pulling Ilara deeper into the cave. Croft, he breathed. Silas Croft. He hadn't followed their trail. He had anticipated it. He knew they'd need shelter. A voice echoed down the canyon. Hawk, I know you're in there. I have someone you might want to see. Ilara's heart stopped. She and Hawk moved to the mouth of the cave, staying in the shadows. On the ridge opposite them, silhouetted against the sunrise, were 3 figures. Silas Croft and 2 of his men. And between them, slumped over a horse, was a 4th figure. It was her father, Gideon. He followed you, girl. Croft yelled, his voice laced with amusement. Poor old man, half crazy, babbling about a confession. Found him wandering in the desert. Judge Thorne wants him back. But he wants the warrior dead. And you? Well, he said you're damaged goods now. He just wants you back as an example. Father, Ilara screamed. Ilara, don't. It's a trap. Gideon's voice was weak but desperate. He was beaten, his face swollen. Here's the deal, Hawk, Croft shouted. Send the girl out. I'll let the old man go. You and I can settle this man to man. Refuse, and I'll shoot him right here. Hawk gripped Ilara's arm, holding her back. It is a lie. He will kill him anyway. I have to, Ilara sobbed. I can't let him. Look, Gideon yelled. With a strength Ilara didn't know he possessed, he broke free from the men holding him. He was holding something in his hand, a small tin box. This is it, Ilara. This is the proof, he screamed. He didn't burn it. I had it. I always... A single shot rang out. Gideon staggered, clutching his chest. He looked at Ilara, his eyes wide, with a terrible final understanding. He pitched forward and fell from the ridge, tumbling down the rocks to the canyon floor. No, father. Ilara's scream echoed a sound of pure primal agony. Croft laughed, a dry, cold sound. Well, that simplifies things. Now I'm just coming in. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off the rock around their cave. But the twist, the one Croft hadn't anticipated, had changed the game. Gideon hadn't just been a hostage. He had been a messenger. "Stay here," Hawk commanded. "No, I'm going with you. I'm going to him." Ilara's grief had burned away her fear, leaving only a core of pure, unadulterated rage. She picked up a heavy, sharp rock. "He's on the ridge. We are in the cave. We are trapped," Hawk said. "No." Ilara said, her mind suddenly terrifyingly clear. "You taught me to think. He's on the ridge. He has to come down to get us. But he doesn't know the back of this cave." Hawk looked at her, and a slow, fierce admiration lit his eyes. Gideon's body lay on the canyon floor, the tin box just feet from his outstretched hand. "They have to come down for him," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "To get the box. They don't know what it is, but they know he thought it was important." "They'll send one man," Hawk said. "Croft will cover him from above. We cannot get to the box." "We don't need to," Ilara said, pointing to a narrow fissure at the back of the cave she'd seen earlier. "We need to get to him." They fled into the blackness of the cave. It twisted, turned, and as Ilara had prayed, it opened up 1/2 mile down the canyon, completely out of sight of Croft's perch. They circled back high above, moving like ghosts. They watched as Croft and his 2 men descended, rifles ready. Croft, ever the professional, approached Gideon's body. He nudged him with his boot, then spotted the tin box. He picked it up, wiping the dust off. "Just junk," he muttered to his men. He opened it. Inside was a stack of papers. Croft pulled them out. His eyes scanned the first page. His whole body went still. "Well, I'll be—" he whispered, a low whistle escaping his lips. The old man wasn't crazy. "What is it, boss?" "It's a full confession," Croft said, a strange new light in his eyes. Signed and dated by Judge Alistair Thorne, 10 years ago, confessing to the original granary fire, the one he framed Bishop for. He gave it to Bishop to guarantee his silence. This is the whole kingdom." Croft looked up from the paper, no longer a bounty hunter, but a man holding a winning hand. He looked toward the cave. "The judge didn't pay me enough for this." "Boss, the deal has changed," Croft said. "We're not bringing the girl back. We're bringing this." But before he could move, Hawk and Ilara stepped out from the rocks behind him. "That," Ilara said, her voice echoing in the canyon, "belongs to me." They returned to Redemption Creek as ghosts. Croft, seeing a bigger payday in the confession, agreed to help. The town was locked down by Thorne's men. To get to the U.S. Marshal in the hotel, Hawk created a diversion, setting the courthouse on fire. As the judge's men ran to the blaze, Croft and Hawk fought their way into the hotel, getting Ilara to Marshal Elias Stone. Ilara burst into his room and handed Stone the tin box. "This is Judge Thorne's confession. He murdered my father." Just then, Thorne Jasper and Sheriff Brody stormed in. "She's lying, seize them," Thorne roared. "I'm a U.S. Marshal and you are under arrest." Stone boomed, holding the proof. Enraged, Jasper aimed his pistol at Ilara. "You were mine," before he could fire a knife from Hawk's hand, silenced him forever. As the judge drew his own weapon, Silas Croft, seeing the tide turn, shot him in the arm. "Just business, Judge." Marshal Stone arrested Thorne and Brody. Thorne's reign was over. At sunrise, Ilara and Hawk stood on the boardwalk. She was homeless, but free. "The law will give you back your land," Hawk said. "Teach me," Ilara said, no longer a captive. "Teach me how to listen to the land." He nodded, and they walked into the new day together. Ilara Bishop's story wasn't one of a damsel in distress. It was the story of a woman who, when her life was burned to ashes, found the courage to rise. She lost her home, her father, and the name she knew, but she gained a freedom more vast than the Dakota Territory itself. The blood moon wasn't an ending, it was a reckoning. It was the night a promised bride was broken and a warrior queen was born. Their fight was over, but their story, the story of rebuilding a life of healing, a poisoned land, and of a love born in fire and shadow, was just beginning. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were on the edge of your seat, please don't forget to hit that like button, as it truly helps this channel. Share this video with a friend who loves a story of true justice, and most importantly, subscribe and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the next tale we have for you. We'll see you in the next story.